Diaspora's Career Challenges, the podcast where we dive into joys and struggles of being an immigrant or the child of one. I am your host, Sweta Regmi, founder of Teach and Do, certified career strategist and personal branding consultant. If you've ever heard about where are you really from, or had your name mispronounced so badly it does not even sound like a name anymore, this podcast is for you. Every week, we'll chat about endless juggling, act of trying to fit in, the identity crisis no one prepared you for, and why being an immigrant or a child of one is the ultimate life skill. If only people could look past your accent. So grab your coffee or chai or chia and let's get real about what it's like to be too foreign for here and too local for there. Buckle up, it's gonna get sarcastic. I have Angie Seth, a journalist, host, and storyteller. She has been a journalist for over 25 years. Angie started her career at Omni Television as an anchor, reporter, and producer. From there, her career took to the places such as CBC radio, television screens, global, CTV News, and back to CBC. She's also Queen's Diamond Jubilee recipient.
So what's in a name? Well, for anyone, it's our calling card, our identity, our badge, something we should be proud of. But what if your name is mocked, altered by others because it's just easier for them to pronounce? Or what if your name is a barrier to achieving your best self over others with a more, quote, acceptable name?
Angie, welcome to my show, Diaspora's Career Challenges. It's an honor to have you back after we did the live session for South Asian community back in May. How are you?
I'm good. And congratulations on this. This is a really cool idea that you decided to sort of jump on this in this area of, I guess, doing sort of stories and broadcast and whatnot. So, congratulations.
I was newcomer back in 2000. And when I saw you on Omni Television, South Asian channel, I looked at you and I saw that she looks like she has a background from Southeast Asia, but I don't know. And I kind of started having that biases in my mind. Felt it as a newcomer. Where is she really from? So Tell us, where are you really from?
Well, I mean, I was born here in Canada. I was born in Winnipeg. And that is when my parents came. So my parents both are from India. My dad was born in Banaras, and my mother was born in Lucknow. So they're from Uttar Pradesh, the northern part of India. My sister was also born in India, so the family is from there. I was the only one that was born here, but northern part of India, they had lighter skin. My mom does, had brown hair. My dad has darker hair, but his skin's sort of more olive. But that was pretty much the consensus of, so you're not from here, where are you from? And even with members of the community, I mean, as a younger kid, I used to be asked if I dyed my hair, which I didn't. I've never dyed my hair. But I used to be told, are you sure you're fully South Asian? Are you sure your parents aren't from somewhere else? And then we even within the community, even within our sort of my parents' friend circle, or sort of, you go to events and whatnot, and they would just be like, well, you're not Indian enough for us. And I'd be going, what does that mean? I'm like, I speak the language. I go to temple. I go like I'm not that defines who you are as an Indian or a South Asian, but it was like I eat. We made Indian food. We eat Indian food. All the same kind of family values. We had family members that lived with us. My grandmother was the one that taught me Hindi. She taught me how to put on a sari, all these things. And I just kept saying to myself, I'm not Indian enough. So what do I need to do? Do I need to speak with an accent? But I don't have an accent. It was just really, but I'm like, just because I'm not born there doesn't mean I still can't be fully Indian. And then I started, as I got older, they go, well, your skin is so light colored. And I went, yeah, you know what? One word, it's called colonialism. Do your research. Do your research and find out to what happened to the northern part of India. And this is why we have lighter skin. I said the southern part of India was not touched. Hence, some members will have a darker skin, but we are all of the same. And we know that there was always all of those unfortunate typecasts of, well, if you have a lighter skin, then you must be from this caste. Darker skin, you must be from a lower caste. And I would be like, are you kidding me? I mean, be proud of who you are and don't redefine who we are outside of the community and within the community. So it was always a bit of a battle when I was younger. And that sort of morphed into, of course, I mean, we can talk about what it was like in the school ground, because in the school ground, even though you're lighter skinned, you're not lighter skinned. You are still a different color. My color was dirty. That was my color. But if you're tanned, you were lovely. I was never tanned. I was dirty. So you're like, I really can't win here. I don't know what to say. So it was like, you know what? Take me as I am or don't take me at all. I really don't care. But saw that there is this need to stand up for who you are, what your values are. I'd say one of the funniest things I can do is go into an Indian shop, or even when I was in India, and start speaking the language, and it just freaks everybody out because they're going, how do you know? And you're like, yeah, I know that because I am, like, really, think about it. So it's, it's been an interesting ride. I was always known as the UN. I must be from, where am I from? I could be Italian, I could be Spanish, I could be Greek, I could be Middle Eastern, I could be Indian, maybe, but I'm not white. So I'm something. We don't know what.
Oh gosh, right? This is exactly what the episode is all about. If people like you who were born here, and I was a newcomer, immigrant in Canada so many years ago, if I have that biases, but where she's really from, I think she just made that accent up, right? It's such a valid point that tell me more about when you went back home to connect with your roots, did you feel like you're not local enough there? Did you tell me the experience? What did you feel?
My family was great. I mean, the only thing the difference was my cousins were very protective. Don't wear short sleeves, don't wear shorts. And it was really, really hot when we went. And it was the only time we could go. We ended up going in August, which I don't recommend anybody to. So when you were younger, that was kind of the thing. I mean, I've gone a few times when I was very, very young. That was, that's sort of a different experience. But it was sort of more the, no, we don't want anyone to see like your arms, your legs or whatnot. And that was just, I think that was sort of more a male stereotype in terms of how women can be treated. And, a guy can walk around in his underwear, but a girl can't show off her arms type of thing. So it was more that no one really, I mean, I would get teased about my Hindi a bit because, I mean, it isn't perfect. हम हिंदी बोलते हैं लेकिन हमारा एक्सेंट हल्का सा अंग्रेजी है, लेकिन सब लोग कहते हैं कि नहीं बहुत प्यारा हिंदी तुम बोलते हैं, लेकिन फिर भी इतना साफ नहीं है, which is I get, right? Which I totally understand. And if for anyone that's listening right now doesn't understand what I'm saying, I basically said I can speak Hindi, but it is not pure Hindi. It's not perfectly clear. I do have a bit of a Canadian accent there. But everyone kind of teases me and says it's so sweet when you speak, and I go, well, that's what my grandmother taught me. And that's what I enjoy. And we watched, Indian movies and Bollywood movies and whatnot. And you sort of learned from there. But family back home, we absorbed into wanting to wear, our shalwar kameez and because it just, you wanted to embrace all of that. I felt more free because growing up here as a young child, I couldn't express that I was Indian. I couldn't take the food that I ate at home to school. I couldn't have mehndi on my hands and have anyone said it was cool. Now it's beautiful. Yeah. Back then when you were younger, it was like, what is that? What is this on, and you were always told, well, your parents are immigrants, so you really can't be, our level, because you must be further down on, you must be poor, you must be less educated, you must be. So, I went to a private school. My parents worked very, very hard, both of them as doctors, to send my sister and I to a private school. And that was really like, are they sure they're real doctors? Because I don't know if can they really afford this? And it was like, are you kidding me? But when I went to India, it was wonderful to see my family. They loved that I spoke Hindi. Yes, I did stand out because it wasn't because of my lighter skin, because all my family, everyone's lighter skin, very brown hair, right? That was sort of a bit of the difference. But, I loved the fact that everyone we were speaking our language and we were embraced in all of that. And it was wonderful. So I didn't feel like I stood out like a sore thumb. I did chuckle that, it was, some of the male stereotypes, but I mean, that kind of exists pretty much everywhere. But it was fun that I need to take my own children to go, who my children are mixed, and we can get into that conversation later, but my children are mixed. So you see elements of two different cultures in their face, where they act. I mean, when they do speak a little bit of Hindi, their accent is so beautiful because they've got, a much a younger, more flexible palate in order to do so. And love Indian food. But our house we were Indian in the house. And when I left the house, I had to be my Western self because no one would accept that I was Indian until much later in my years, when all of a sudden Bollywood and whatnot became exciting and popular. And I would chuckle because I'd be going, wow, we've been doing this forever. And now it's a fun thing to do. Oh, okay. And they're like, oh my God, can you teach us how to dance and whatnot? And I'm like going, why? Because now it's not, you kind of want to be one of us. I think, Sweta, one of the best lines I was told by someone, this was a classmate of mine years ago, had gone away at the summertime, came back. And of course, my skin gets a lot darker in the summer. And I always say, well, that's my real color. In the wintertime, we kind of we're deprived of our vitamin D, so we tend to all pale out. But said, oh my God, look at me. I'm so dark. I'm just like you. And I went, yeah, no, you'll never be just like me. And you will never experience the things that we've experienced. But sure, fair. Enjoy the darker skin. And at least I'm not dirty anymore. We'll go with that.
That's so true, because I remember when I went back home, I got tanned, and then in airport and duty free, I was trying to buy this foundation shade. And as you said, the colorism was always there. And the lady kept on showing me the tan color, medium tan. I'm like, no, I'm not this, right? And right. I didn't get it. And when I started working, my colleagues were wearing the medium tan, but they were totally white. And I'm like, look at how
the difference.
We want to be a little bit lighter, and they want a tan. And I've never tanned. Even when I go on vacations, I sit there and I just cover myself up. I don't like the tan look. And I think eventually I got used to it. And as you said about tanning culture, we come from a different culture where we don't want to be dark.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it is kind of funny that way. And now, of course, I tease and I say, I go, oh, well, summertime. This is the real color. This is me. Interesting. I think the more we have embraced, I'm going to say multiculturalism, because it's been here. It's not like we haven't had it. Mind you, that when my parents came here from India, or from England, because they went from India to England to Canada, there were 5 Indian families, and that's who we knew. And we still know them. They're still our friends. But on our street, we were the only Indian family, and we stood out like a sore thumb. And we were told that. But there were others in the neighborhood that were amazing and embracing and whatnot. So just a little bit more. I mean, you go into a Walmart and you see diyas for Diwali like that. We never had that when we were younger. We could only go to one place to get anything remotely Indian, and that was Gerrard Street. Nothing else existed if we wanted anything remotely like that. Even to get any of the spices, now you can't do that. But when we would go back and forth to India, my grandmother used to bring back all the spices because you can't get them here. Now, of course, you can, oh my God, this is fancy and that's fancy. And President's Choice is making butter chicken and biryani and whatnot. And I'm going, not really, but okay, fine. If you want to try and jump on the South Asian bandwagon, you can try. But, real Indian food is what you make at home. But yeah, it is very interesting now how much more it is so much more embraced than I would say when I was younger. But there's still a lot. Like I still see it. Especially with now that my children are mixed.
Tell me more about that. What do they feel? Do they talk to you about it? Are they being asked as well? My kids are born here too, and they're asked all the time, where are you really from? And we moved from Toronto to Sudbury just a couple of years ago only. And Toronto was multicultural. Sudbury is more, we're getting there, but we're not going to get there. It's northern. Yeah. So they get asked all the time, where are you from? And I thought I was doing a justice by actually educating them and saying, you know what, you're from Nepal, but they were not from Nepal. I was born and raised in Nepal, but I immigrated, but they're born here. And I created the identity crisis on them. So eventually I decided they're not Nepalese. They have a background from my back home, right? I have no right to dictate you're from Nepal because they're Canadian. They're born here. So I had to change my mindset as well, because I was pressuring them to, be one of us, but they cannot be. There's a difference between, upbringing, right? What are your thoughts on your kids? Like, Are they still being asked, especially if they're mixed race?
Well, it's interesting. My eldest daughter from my first marriage, her dad is West Indian, and she, as everyone says, is my twin. So we're both darker skinned, and my current husband is Serbian, so very fair skinned. So our other two children are mixed. And by mix, I mean when my middle daughter was born, very, very fair skin and extremely blue eyes and light colored hair. My youngest son is same thing. He had a little bit more pigmentation, but very blue eyes and brown hair. So both the younger ones have my pigmentation. They will get darker in the summertime. And again, we like to joke in the house and say at the summertime, my older daughter and I go chocolate, and the other two just kind of go a golden brown. They don't. So it's interesting because when my husband and I got married, within both the Indian and Serbian cultures, it was like, oh, she's not Serbian, he's not Indian. Oh my gosh. But slowly was embraced. And then it was almost like, oh my God, if they have more kids, I wonder what the kids are going to look like. And there was an excitement, because now we're seeing that. I mean, it wasn't, it was me that was marrying outside of the culture, but then other people were doing it as well. And so we kind of embrace the fact that we have the Serbian culture, we have the Indian culture, and we kind of do as much as we can from both. My kids don't get asked. The two younger ones don't really get asked because they are representative of what we see in schools today. My older one, on the other hand, has been asked and has gone through the same stuff of where she's been stereotyped, where she's, where exactly are you from? And, oh my God, your mom is Indian? Like, are you sure? Like, she's like, very sure. We've had an incident where we were very much typecasted. This was when my middle daughter was 3 months old and we were traveling in the US. And it was my husband, my elder daughter, my middle one was just a baby at the time, and of course myself. And we were at security to go through and check your bags. And a very large security agent came up to my daughter and I and looked in the baby carriage and looked at me and said, "Is this your daughter?" And I just went, well, I kind of went, "I'm sorry, what?" And he got quite curt with me. He goes, "Is this your daughter? Or is this your child, I should say?" And I'm like, I froze. I was like, and he goes, "Is this your child?" And he looks at my older daughter, looks at me. You can see the resemblance there, but you got a very fair-skinned little baby, blue eyes, just looking up at him, 3 months old. What was she going to say? And then shortly after, my husband walked up and he's like, "Hey, is everything okay? Everything fine?" He looked at my husband, looked at the baby in the carriage, looked back at my husband and said, "No, now we're fine," and walked away. I was terrified. Terrified because had my husband not been there, I was picturing him separating the three of us. And I was like, what proof would I have had that this is my child, aside from her birth certificate and her passport? If anyone could have stolen that. Aside from them taking me to a hospital to get a blood test to determine, until then, I wouldn't have known. And this individual was questioning whether or not, but she didn't look like me. She was too fair. Now now you see the resemblance, but as a baby, she looked exactly like my husband. She did not look like me. And I was terrified. And I still get the looks if I'm somewhere where it's more white predominant, and they'll look at me and they'll look at the kids and they'll be like, "Nanny." But there is still some of that, kind of that brown skin looking at you a funny way, that type of thing. Because you're kind of going, really, you're here, I'm here. All of us are immigrants to this country, unless you're, unless you were born, unless you founded the land, as we know who did. Our wonderful community of Indigenous and First Nation and whatnot. Otherwise, we are all immigrants to this country in one shape or form. We cannot say that we are full-fledged. We're not.
That's a great point. Yeah. And coming to that one, hold on to that thought. I want to ask you one thing that I'm dying to know this. I mean, from where we are from South Asia, right? Like, I'm from Nepal and everyone wants to be doctor, engineer, everyone has that career. And then when you found, your passion as a journalist, who you are today, how was the support like? Was it open? Were they shocked? Your parents were shocked? Tell me more about that when it comes to career, choosing the journalist path.
I mean, I originally wanted to go into law, and so I did political science over at U of T. But I realized it wasn't going to give me what I wanted. And so eventually when I got into journalism, they were very supportive. I think for them, it was hard to understand exactly what the process was going to be like, because it's not like you just walk into a news station and say, hey, I'm going to be on the air. I mean, you start, and we started, Omni was amazing. It was probably one of the best places I could go to learn. But you started with rewinding tapes and learning how everything worked. The great advantage of being at a smaller shop was the fact that you got thrown into everything, because you don't have the larger teams like some of the other mainstream stations would have. So it was, there was, a push, but the community embraced it, enjoyed it. You started giving them a voice. And that was, I think, probably one of the biggest things there. I had a pulse in the community that nobody else had. Mainstream media didn't have it. It all sort of come down to trust. So for my parents, though, it was a matter of like, okay, well, here's kind of the plan. This is kind of where you want to go with it. And sort of understanding sort of the process was a little bit difficult. But once they kind of got through it, because, both my parents are doctors, so they understand, what that process is like, right? All the studying and whatnot, and you go into medical school and you do residency, and it's sort of boom, boom, boom. As a journalist, there's so many different elements to it. You can work in front of the camera, behind the camera, but it's not as simple to say, oh, I want to do this. You kind of have to, you have to cut your teeth as many times as you possibly can, right? Before you can get there and prove yourself, and know that whether you're good or not. So maybe you're not as good, and you have to sort of work on that and accept that. So I was just knowing that my determination was to continue on in the industry, even after I left Omni. I think for them was to be like, okay, well, she's clearly serious about it, and this is what she wants to do, so we'll be here to support her. But I think it was, for me, the motivation was seeing how much of a volume to the voice of the community you could give was what the rewarding part was. So it was like, okay, here we go. Here's how I can show you what I'm doing. And why it has value.
So, Angie, did you ever feel like you are two Canadians for our uncle and auntie? And then two Canadians, you're not Canadian enough for people here. How did you find that balance throughout your career or life?
It's interesting. So, okay, here's one aspect of it. In the community, and we know sort of within the community, we don't talk about the negative, right? Getting divorced was a big negative. And, but it was an important step that I had to take. And when you're kind of one of the first to kind of have to deal with that, you kind of stand out like a sore thumb. So the uncles and aunties, and mostly the aunties, were like, oh my God, we're so sorry. Don't worry. It won't be negative on your life. And I was kind of like, negative on my life? Whereas if a man got divorced, then it's fine, right? And I can see the look on your face that, yeah, you're like, okay, whatever. I was told, there won't be a mark on your back. Someone will eventually want you. And I was like, excuse me? I don't know who. How about go the other way around? Would I even want them? No. And I had no plans to remarry. So that was kind of the Canadian side of it. Because it was just like, no, I'm not going to do the stereotypical. I'm going to just stay in this relationship whether I like it or not, and whether it's good or it's not. We've seen so many of these stories that have happened, or scenarios that have happened, or the typical just suck it up and it'll be fine, and do it for the family. Don't bring shame on the family. This was not bringing shame on the family. My parents were very proud of me. But on the flip side to being to express yourself as an Indian, it was being able to show things in your house, being able to dress the way that you want to. I still remember as a kid, I would go in my shalwar kameez to the grocery store because I loved wearing it. It was comfortable and it was beautiful. It means balancing out and wearing some Indian jewelry on the air, or wearing something that is something Indian on the air. Not because I'm like, hey, everybody, I'm South Asian, so you'd all know now. It's okay. I've answered all your questions. It's because this is who I am, right? This is what I like. This is what I'm going to embrace. This is why I'm doing this. It is not, and that's where I'm finding my balance to say, I will raise my children here in this country. My parents came to this country. they've chosen that they will stay here and they will live here, whether they go back to India or not and visit and whatnot. And my decision to balance it out is to be able to give my children Canadian values and Indian values. And of course, now we bring in the Serbian values, which, when it's funny that I'm saying all three, they're all the same. We just change things slightly. The story is just slightly different, but the end game is still the same end game, right? And that's where I found my balance. When I go, in all seriousness, if we're at church and we're reading something from the Bible, my son asks me, well, what about the Bhagavad Gita? And I said, it's the same story, just change the names. And they find that to be fascinating. So my balance is taking all of this that I have and being able to work with it and embrace it and to have it guide where my life is going to go. As a young child, I went to the temple, and the mandir was my place for peace. And that peace helped me deal with all the other stuff that you had to deal with. The racism on the playground, the questioning of where my background is, being bullied in school because your skin was too dark and having to stand up for yourself, and then being told that you were too passionate because of your Indian background. And then later on in life, being able to stand up as a strong woman because you're a strong woman, not because you're a brown woman or because you're not a brown woman. All the values are the same. So when I say where you want to find that balance, when uncles and aunties would come up to me and sort of, oh, are you doing okay? Because, and I was a single parent for a long period of time. And that was also like, oh my God, how is she going to manage it? It was like, I can manage it because I have so much here to help me manage it. That's how you balance it out. The stereotypes and whatnot, I say you just push that off aside. They will always exist, but we can venture forward and teach our children something different so that their reality is different. And when we talk about balancing different cultures, it's more like we're saying to them, how do you balance your life versus the West versus the East? They're all kind of one and the same.
Absolutely. Great examples of uncle and aunties, right? So any uncle and aunties listening to you right now, you got to hear this episode. Angie, thank you so much for coming in. And I know you're going to be fantastic advocating for now the topic, where you really from? Because that's just the show today. And look what happened. We went so deeper from that one question, hidden biases that it has inside. But where are you really from? We went so deep. And thank you so much for being so personal and sharing the personal stories.
You're very welcome, and congratulations. Keep doing what you're doing as well. Keep having these conversations. They're very, very important. Don't be afraid to. If you get pushback, you get pushback. That's just because then you invite those people to have those conversations too, and you'll probably get a different response.
Always a pleasure to, go back and collaborate on things that you believe in, I believe in, because we are nobody without the collaborations, right?
There you go.
So, hidden biases on the question as such, where are you really, really from? Stay tuned for the next episode. We're going to be bringing in all the topics all about diaspora's career challenges. And we're going to come up with the topics as such where nobody's talking about it. The hidden biases, probably the discriminations, and the questions that's going to trigger our emotional intelligence. That's it for today on Diaspora's Career Challenges, where we're all too much and not enough at the same time. If you loved hearing about name fails, accent comment, or why no one ever gets where you're from, right? Make sure to like and subscribe and share with your favorite misunderstood immigrant or diasporas or first-gen friend. Because let's face it, your name isn't a puzzle. Your accent isn't an exotic feature. And no, you don't look like where you're from, but cares about fitting in anyway. Catch you next week. Same struggles, same sarcasm.